ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Naranarayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So, reading from Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text 9. Yatha dharma adayah cha arthaha yatha dharmadayah chartah munivarya anukirtitaha munivaryanukirtitaha na tatha vasudevasya na tatha vasudevasya mahima hi anuvarnitaha mahima hi anuvarnitaha yatha dharmadayascha munivaryanukirtitaha na tatha vasudevasya mahima hi anuvarnitaha yatha dharmadayascha munivaryanukirtitaha na tatha vasudevasya mahima hi anuvarnitaha yatha dharmadayascha munivaryanukirtitaha na tatha vasudevasya mahima hi anuvarnitaha yatha dharmadayascha munivaryanukirtitaha na tatha vasudevasya mahima hi anuvarnitaha yatha dharmadayascha munivaryanukirtitaha na tatha vasudevasya mahima hi anuvarnitaha. Online.
यथा धर्मादस्य चार्था
यथा धर्मादयश्चार्था
मुनिवर्यानुकीर्तिताः
मुनिवर्यानुकीर्तिताः
न तथा वासुदेवस्य
न तथा वासुदेवस्य
महिमा हि अनुवर्णिताः
महिमा हि अनुवर्णिताः
यथा धर्मादयश्चार्था
यथा धर्मादयश्चार्था
मुनिवर्यानुकीर्तिताः
मुनिवर्यानुकीर्तिताः
न तथा वासुदेवस्य
न तथा वासुदेवस्य
महिमा हि अनुवर्णिताः
महिमा हि अनुवर्णिताः
यथा धर्मादयश्चार्था
यथा धर्मादयश्चार्थ
वर्यानुकीर्तिताः
मुनिवर्यानुकीर्तिताः
न तथा वासुदेवस्य
न तथा वासुदेवस्य
महिमा हि अनुवर्णितः
महिमा हि अनुवर्णितः पृथ्वी
Bro, I have a little problem with the pronunciation, so I can.
no problem, try, it's okay. You can look at down the word to word meaning, it can help you in
Yata dharmadayascharta
यथा धर्मादयश्चार्थ
munivaryanukirtitaha
मुनिवर्यानुकीर्तितः
nata tata vasudevasya
न तथा वासुदेवस्य
महिमाहि अनुवर्णितः.
महिमा हि अनुवर्णितः. Anyone else? Okay. Word to word meaning. Yatha, as much as. Dharma adayah, all four principles of religious behavior. Cha, and. Arthaha, purposes. Munivarya, by yourself, the great sage. Anukirtitaha, repeatedly described. Na, not. Tatha, in that way. Vasudevasya, of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Mahima, glories. He, certainly. Anuvarnitaha, so constantly described. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Although, great sage, you have very broadly described the four principles beginning with religious performances, you have not described the glories of the Supreme Personality, Vasudeva. Translation with repetition. Although, great sage, you have very broadly described the four principles beginning with religious performances, you have not described the glories of the Supreme Personality, Vasudeva. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The prompt diagnosis of Sri Narada is at once declared. The root cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva was deliberate avoidance of glorifying the Lord in his various editions of the Puranas. He has certainly, as a matter of course, given descriptions of the glories of the Lord Sri Krishna, but not as many as given to religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. These four items are by far inferior to engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. Sri Vyasadeva, as the authorized scholar, knew very well this difference. And still, instead of giving more importance to the better type of engagement, namely devotional service to the Lord, he had more or less improperly used his valuable time, and thus he was despondent. From this, it is clearly indicated that no one can be pleased substantially without being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is clearly mentioned. After liberation, which is the last item in the line of performing religiosity, etc., one is engaged in pure devotional service. This is called the stage of self-realization or the Brahma Bhuta stage. After attainment of this Brahma Bhuta stage, one is satisfied. But satisfaction is the beginning of transcendental bliss. One should progress by attaining neutrality and equality in the relative world. And passing the stage of equanimity, one is fixed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the instruction of the personality of Godhead in the Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion is that in order to maintain the status quo of the Brahmabhuta stage, as also to increase the degree of transcendental realization, Narada recommended to Vyasadeva that he, Vyasadeva, should now eagerly and repeatedly describe the path of devotional service. This would cure him from gross despondency. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are towards the end of a crisis. So, as Prabhupada describes in the very first line of the purport, that Narad Muni is giving a clear diagnosis of the problem or the crisis that Srila Vyasadeva is facing. So let us try to look at this verse as what is being said here. It is being said here, Yatha Dharmadayaschartha Munivaryanu Kirtitaha. So firstly, it's important to recognize here how Narada Muni is addressing Srila Vyasadeva. Narada Muni is saying, Munivarya, the great sage, or the chief among the sages, or the best sage. So Narada Muni is describing Srila Vyasadeva with great respect, Munivarya. And he is describing that what is the cause for his despondency? What was the cause for his dissatisfaction? So here, there are two important statements that are being made by Srila Narada Muni. The first one is that Yatha Dharma Adayaha. So Dharma Adayaha. Adaya means Prabhupada says from the beginning or etc. So starting from Dharma. So what is that? Is starting from Dharma. So Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, the four principles of religious behavior. So that is being compacted into one word here by stating Dharma Dayaha. So beginning from Dharma, the four principles that you have given, Anukirtitaha. So Yatha Anukirtitaha. So as you have repeatedly described them. So Narada Muni is saying to Srila Vyasadeva that you have Anukirtitaha, you have repeatedly talked about these four subjects, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. But what you have not done, as much as that you have done for these four subjects, is that Vasudevasya Mahima na tatha anuvarnitaha. Although you have described broadly about these subject matters of four religious principles, but you have not equally given importance to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, or son of Vasudeva, Lord Krishna. So you have not done as much as you have described the other four things. So this is the solution that Narada Muni is giving to Vyasadeva, that you have done this, but you have not done this. So now if you do this, what you have not done, your problem will be solved. So this is the translation, and there is so much in the purport. So in the first line, Srila Prabhupada is saying, the prompt diagnosis of Sri Narada is at once declared. So this is a very simple statement, but it has a lot of significance. The prompt diagnosis. So here we should understand, just to recap, the condition of Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva is no ordinary person. He is the Shaktyavesh avatar of the Supreme Lord. And he has compiled, in fact, one Veda into 4, so that people can easily understand. The Yajurveda has been further expanded into Yajurveda, Atharvaveda, Sama, and Rig Veda, so that people can easily understand. And even further, recognizing when Srila Vyasadeva was meditating on the banks of river Saraswati after performing his morning ablutions, and he saw that people of this Kali Yuga are going to suffer so much. So he not only divided one Veda into 4, he also compiled Puranas and then Mahabharata, so that even people who are less intelligent, they can also understand. Puranas are nothing but the supplements to the Vedic knowledge. So in spite of writing so much, in spite of meditating on the well-being of the people, he felt that there is still something is missing. In his mind and in his heart, he was dissatisfied. He was feeling that there is something which is not complete. And what did he do when he felt this dissatisfaction in his heart and mind? He began to reflect, actually. He began to reflect in his mind as what is happening? Why is this missing link? What is a missing link? Where am I doing? What am I doing wrong? And he was also regretting that maybe I did not do something. Maybe I'm supposed to do something. So when he was reflecting and regretting, that's when sage Narada appears there. And as we saw, Srila Vyasadeva, with great awe and reverence, welcomes Sri Naradaji and offers him a seat. And then this conversation is taking place. Now, it is important to recognize that in spite of doing so much, imagine if someone is working very, very hard. Someone is putting all his energies, time and energy to do something, and let's say he's dissatisfied. That is one case. Imagine someone is putting in a lot of effort and energy and not only doing something for one's own good, but for the well-being of all the people. And even after that, if one is feeling that there is something missing, there is something still not satisfying, that is even more worrisome. It's more dissatisfying. It can make one even more low-spirited. So now, in this condition, Vyasadeva is trying to do good. He's trying to do well-being for everyone. He is compiling such great literatures, and even then there is some dissatisfaction. And usually, whenever there is a crisis, people have different kinds of crises. People say economic crisis. Prabhupada says there will be oil crisis, there will be water crisis, midlife crisis, health crisis. So there are various crises people undergo. But how does one overcome the crises? How does one resolve the crisis? Is a very important aspect. And in fact, the entire Bhagavatam is of different narrations of different crises that people have, devotees have undergone, and how they have overcome the different crises. Be it Maharaj Parikshit in his greatest crisis of just has got only 7 days to live, and how does he manage his greatest crisis? Dhruva Maharaj has a crisis of being disowned by his stepmother and being asked to move away from his father's lap. There's a crisis. in various circumstances, there are various crises that emerge. And how does one handle this situation of various crises in life? And here, within first few statements in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing as how that can be resolved. And usually, Prabhupada, in the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, that's in 2.7 and 2.8, Prabhupada in the purport explains about how one should overcome a crisis and how one can actually do that. So, as we can see in the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna has given all the possible reasons that he can give to not fight the battle. And in spite of all giving such reasons, Prabhupada mentions that he was not able to solve the problem. So Prabhupada explains there that by nature's own way, the perplexities of life or the crises in life will come. Just like there is forest fire, no one knows why it is coming, but it comes. We do not know what is the exact source of that, but it comes. Similarly, no one may desire, but for certain, the working of the material nature is such that one will be put into perplexity, one will be put into crisis. Now, by one's own endeavor and intelligence, one cannot stop a big fire, forest fire, but simply putting some water with one's own hands. Similarly, these perplexities that arise from the material world, these perplexities that arise from the various situations in material life cannot be solved just by one's own reasoning and one's own abilities. This is a very first important principle to recognize, that not all the crises in our life we can solve by our own abilities. And especially when the crisis is to do with the most fundamental aspects of our own existence, then it becomes even more difficult. So, for example, for health, one can go to a doctor. If there is an economic problem, one can go to a financial advisor or some other people, and so on and so forth. But if one wants to understand what is my purpose of life, no Google, no economic advisor, no health advisor, or any one of them can solve. So Srila Prabhupada defines these kinds of crises into one term called problems of life. So there are problems which are pertaining to body, mind, and things. And then there is more fundamental problem of our own existence or our own very basic life. And Prabhupada says that Vedic literatures advise us to approach a bona fide spiritual master to get free from the perplexities of life which happen without any desire, without our desire. So all the Vedic literatures are suggesting one important thing, that we should, even before the crisis comes, if one is intelligent, one must surrender to a pure devotee of the Lord. Because only by His mercy, one can overcome the struggles of the material life, the perplexities, the crises that will come in the life. If one has not surrendered to a pure devotee of the Lord, at least when the circumstances are not favorable, one must take shelter of a pure devotee of the Lord or the Lord Himself, so as to overcome these miseries or the perplexities, because the perplexities of life are to be created by the material nature, so that we awaken ourselves to recognize that there is something wrong. Material nature is created in such a way so that we recognize that there is something wrong that is happening all around. Something that I do not want is coming. Why is that coming? A man of intelligence must awaken himself to recognize and reflect, why is this happening? And then look within and regret that there is something which is going wrong. Now he needs someone who can tell what exactly is wrong and how to overcome that. And that's where one requires a bona fide spiritual master. So here it is said that a bona fide spiritual master knows the science of the solution to the life's perplexities. So this is another important word Srila Prabhupada uses, science of the solution. So it is said that a bona fide spiritual master, he knows everything that is required to solve the problems of life. Simply by approaching a bona fide spiritual master and following his instructions, one can come out of any material crisis or any spiritual crisis or any perplexity of life. So it is also said in this purport, Prabhupada says, who is the man in material perplexities? It is he who does not understand the problems of life. In the Garga Upanishad, the perplexed man is described as follows. Yova etad aksharam gargi avidhi twasmal lokat praiti sakripanaha. He is a miserly man who does not solve the problems of life as a human and who thus quits this world like cats and dogs without understanding the science of self-realization. So here it is being said that he is a miserly man who does not solve the problems of life and quits this body like cats and dogs. So here the significance and importance of human life has been described. See, human life is meant to overcome these perplexities of life, is to make a solution to all these crises that we are going to encounter in our life after life after life. So in the material condition of life, people are falsely attached to the material things, family, society, nation, some economic development. So in this way, there are various conceptions of material attachments which perpetually puts one into another kind of material crisis or another crisis and spiritual crisis. So in all these conditions, if one does not recognize that I am incapable to solve this, I need the guidance of a spiritual master, one will not be able to overcome. And here in this case, Arjuna is surrendering to the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, and seeking for a definitive solution. So this is very important. And Prabhupada, in the very next purport, again brings in this important point that Arjuna's knowledge, so-called knowledge, was useless in driving away his problems, which were drying up his whole existence, and it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of a spiritual master like Lord Krishna. So sometimes people take shelter of academic knowledge. Some people take some scholarship or some sort of economic development or some sort of some other people who might solve the problems of life. But here it is being said that until unless one is not 100% Krishna conscious, a bona fide spiritual master or the Supreme Lord himself, one cannot overcome these problems of life. So with this as the framework, it is important to recognize that the first step in our spiritual journey or whenever we face a crisis is at once to approach the spiritual master to seek his guidance. And Srimad Bhagavatam has innumerable examples of where the devotees, when they are in crisis, they are always guided by the spiritual master or a great devotee. Just like we see in the case of Parikshit Maharaj, he was guided by Sukadeva Goswami, the greatest transcendentalist. Similarly, when Dhruva Maharaj was undergoing the crisis, he was helped by Sri Narada Ji. And similarly, we can see demigods, when they are put into different kinds of trouble, they immediately approach Brahma and all the demigods, they go to the milk ocean and offer their prayers so as to take help from Shirodakshai Vishnu. So this aspect of approaching a bona fide spiritual master to resolve the problems and perplexities of life and the crisis in life is very, very important. And in this case, by the divine inspiration of the Lord, Vyasadeva was feeling despondency within his heart. And by the mercy of the Lord, the sage Narada also appears there. So Lord, who is present as Paramatma, who knows everything, he can detect what is the living entity is feeling. And here, Lord has arranged this thing to happen so that the Srimad Bhagavatam will be spoken. As we saw even in the last verse, all these things are happening so that eventually the true transcendental glories of the Lord are presented by Srila Vyasadeva. And one important thing about a pure devotee or the spiritual master is that he can give a prompt diagnosis. So this prompt diagnosis, although looks a simple word, is actually very, very significant for the fact that it is not easy to recognize what is the problem in life. It is not easy to understand what is going wrong in life, why there is so much of trouble, why I'm not able to make advancement in spiritual life, why I'm not able to engage in more services. So sometimes we may not even know that there is a problem. But when we are in the association of devotees, at least we come to know about some of our problems. So if one is genuinely reflecting and regretting, by the mercy of the Lord, there will be a diagnosis that will come from the spiritual master. And spiritual master is very kind to help us guide. So Prabhupada, although he is a Paramahamsa, he has nothing to do, scold anyone or say anything. But just because to help the devotee progress in his spiritual life, Prabhupada would criticize or sometimes may chastise a devotee. That is just to help a certain kind of anarthas which are present in the heart to be removed. So similarly, it is important that the perfect diagnosis is the first important principle to resolve a crisis. Just like sometimes we may have health crisis, and imagine if the doctor does not know what is the problem, how will he ever give cure to it? And similarly, in life, there are so many problems each one of us are facing, but if we do not know what is the root cause of it, how can we solve them? But here, prompt diagnosis at once. So this is the expertise of a pure devotee, a great spiritual master, that he can immediately rectify, he can immediately understand what is the problem, and then immediately give the solution to rectify the problem. So here, this is a very important quality of a pure devotee, that he can recognize what is the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva was his deliberate avoidance of glorifying the Lord in his various editions of the Puranas. So not only Srila Naradaji could identify the issue here, but he's also giving the solution as what is to be done. So issue here is that Sri Naradaji, Srila Vyasadeva, Vasudevasya Mahima, he has not described Anuvarnitaha. He has not sufficiently described the glories of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. And although he has written Puranas, Mahabharata, and the Vedas, Srila Prabhupada is saying, not that he has not described the glories of Lord Krishna at all. No, that's not the point here. He has described, but not as much as that is given importance to religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. So because the other aspects were given so much importance that sometimes people may miss out this important point, that the goal of the Vedic literature is to know Krishna. The goal of Vedic literature is to serve Krishna. So sometimes people may miss out these principles because Vedic literatures are so vast, so are the Puranas and the Mahabharata. And people get confused with these inferior engagements, which are also described in large quantity. And therefore, it is important that Sri Naradaji wanted this complete glorification, the transcendental glorification of the Lord in its purest form to take place in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he is saying here that whatever you described is the cause of your despondency, because you have not included something which is much more important than all that you have described so far, which is the glorification of the Supreme Lord. Now, it is at this point, it is very important for us to recognize that what is religion? What is the goal of religion? And in fact, Srila Prabhupada, in this, so there is a beautiful discussion Srila Prabhupada discusses with a reporter called Sandy Nixon. So Srila Prabhupada, while he was traveling US, I think this was in 1975. So this is a very nice basic introductory discussion, which is very, very helpful. And let us look, Prabhupada is giving the understanding of what constitutes religion, what is the goal of religion, and how to attain that goal of religion in a very nice way. So first question, Miss Nixon is asking to Srila Prabhupada, she's a reporter, and she's asking, what is Krishna consciousness? And Prabhupada says, Krishna means God. We are all intimately connected with him because he's our original father, but we have forgotten this connection. When we become interested in knowing what is my connection with God, what is the aim of life, then we are called Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada is putting it in very straightforward terms that Krishna means God. We are living entities, are part and parcel, and therefore we are intimately connected with our Father. But we have forgotten this connection that we have with the Supreme Father. And when we become interested in re-establishing and knowing that connection with the Supreme Lord and re-establishing that relationship, what is my connection with God? What is aim of my life? Then we are called as Krishna conscious. Now, then actually there is, let me go to this question. So there is this question after what is Krishna consciousness. Miss Nixon asks a little later that what is unique about Krishna consciousness among all religions. So Prabhupada here gives a very nice description between what is true religion and what is, in some sense, the Kaitava religion. So here it is said, primarily religion means to know God and to love him. That is religion. Nowadays, because of lack of training, nobody knows God. What to speak of loving him? People are satisfied simply going to church and praying, "Oh God, give us our daily bread." In the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is called cheating religion, because the aim is not to know and love God, but to gain some personal profit. In other words, if I profess to follow some religion, but I do not know who God is or how to love him, I am practicing a cheating religion. As far as the Christian religion is concerned, ample opportunity is given to understand God, but no one is taking it. For example, the Bible contains the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," but Christians have built the world's best slaughterhouses. How can they become God conscious if they disobey the commandments of Lord Jesus Christ? And this is going on not just in Christian religion, but in every religion. The title Hindu, Muslim, or Christian is simply a rubber stamp. None of them knows who God is and how to love him. So Srila Prabhupada, in very simple terms, is explaining what is religion and how do you know whether one is a follower of religion or not. Srila Prabhupada, in two simple terms, religion means to know God and to love him. So this is the test. Am I following religion? That means one must develop one's understanding of who God is. And also one must develop one's love for him. If one is not doing this in the name of practicing religion, it is Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. And further, if there is a certain religion which one is telling that I am practicing, but one is not able to know who God is or neither develop love for him, that is called cheating religion. So it's very clear. So there are so many religions people profess that we are following. The question is, sir, do you know who God is? Do you know how to love him? And how much are you developing your love? So Srimad Bhagavatam is very unique in that sense. It does not talk in terms of religion of Hindu, Muslim, Christian. No. Any religion which is evoking love of God, which is engaging one in the service of the Lord, which is helping one recognize and realize the supremacy and the glories of the Supreme Lord, all those are to be considered bona fide. And if not, that is not a bona fide religion. So this is a very important principle for us to distinguish. Sometimes people think, sir, all this, you are also telling liberation, they are also telling liberation. Everything looks very similar. I see no difference between what you are saying and what that other tradition is saying. But if one carefully analyzes, one can see where the difference lies. And Srila Prabhupada explains those differences wonderfully in this discussion. So Prabhupada is giving this answer to this question: do all paths lead to the same end? So sometimes people think everything is fine. Yes, I'm following this and that, some transcendental meditation, some other meditation, or some other process. I'm also feeling good. I'm also experiencing happiness. But here Prabhupada is saying, no, all paths do not lead to the same end. There are 4 classes of men: the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and the bhaktas. And each achieves a different goal. The karmis work for some material profit. For example, in the city, many people work hard day and night, and their purpose is to get some money. Thus, they are fruity workers or karmis. Jnani is a person who thinks, why am I working so hard? The birds, bees, elephants, and other creatures have no profession, yet they are also eating. So why should I unnecessarily work so hard? Rather, let me try to solve the problems of life, birth, death, old age, and disease. Jnanis try to become immortal. They think that if they merge into God's existence, then they will become immune to birth, death, old age, and disease. And yogis try to acquire some mystic power to exhibit a wonderful show. For instance, a yogi can become very small if you put him in a locked room. He can come out of through any little space. By showing this kind of magic, the yogi is immediately accepted as a very wonderful man. Of course, modern yogis simply show some gymnastics. They have no real power. But a real yogi has some power, which is not spiritual but material. So the yogi wants mystic power, the gnani wants salvation from the miseries of life, and the karmi wants material profit. But the bhakta, the devotee, does not want anything for himself. He simply wants to serve God out of love, just as a mother serves her child. There is no question of profit in a mother's service to her child. Out of pure affection and love, she cares for him. When you come to this stage of loving God, that is perfection. Neither the karmi, the gnani, or the yogi can know God. Only the bhakta. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, bhaktya mam abhijanati. Only through the process of bhakti can one understand God. Krishna never says one can understand him by other processes. No, only through bhakti. If you're interested in knowing God and loving him, then you must accept the devotional process. No other process will help you. So Srila Prabhupada, in definitive terms, is giving how one can understand God. Just in the name of religion, I will do some seva, I will do some austerities, or I will perform some other speculative ways of knowing things. That is not sufficient. So there is a categorical difference between all this kind of people. People who are karmis, people who are jnanis, people who are yogis, and people who are bhaktas. Only one who is engaged in pure devotional service one can understand who God is. Who am I? Otherwise, one cannot understand who the Supreme Lord is, what is His glories. So, this process of engaging in devotional service is the essence of all religions. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yatho bhakti radokshache ahetuki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. The paradharma, the ultimate occupational engagement that one can have, is to engage in the loving, unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service. And it is this engagement which will give one solace. And this is the goal of religion, to engage one in this unalloyed devotional service to the Supreme Lord. And as we see in Bhagavad Gita 11.55, Prabhupada says that is the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And what is that? Prabhupada says one must be engaged in Krishna karma. That means whatever activity one is trying to do, one should do for Krishna. And Prabhupada gives various examples in that purport. Prabhupada says if you are having a business, you should perform the business in such a way that the Lord is the proprietor, and one should give the results to the Lord. If one is not able to do that, one should come and clean the temple. One should help in doing services in the temple. If one is not even able to do that, Prabhupada says in India there is land available for even for a poor man. He should grow some tulsi leaves and offer to the Lord, which is so dear to the Lord. So in this way, Prabhupada says that one must engage in serving Krishna. And now there is another beautiful answer Prabhupada gives, that how this transformation happens. How do we know that this transformation is happening? So, and how this is to be seen. So, this Prabhupada answers in relation to this question, that how does Krishna consciousness develop in the practitioner? So, Krishna consciousness, as we saw, is to understand God and serve Him and love Him. So, Prabhupada is giving that Krishna consciousness is already present in everyone's heart. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunaya Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karaya Udaya. So first point Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in this answer is that the Krishna consciousness is dormant in every living entity's heart. It is not something that has to be exported or imported from somewhere else to be made a part of us. And Prabhupada is saying that this process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, revives the Krishna consciousness we already have. So this is another test for religion. How much am I reviving my God consciousness? How am I, so there are two terms, Ashraya Tattva and Ashriya Tattva. So Ashraya Tattva means the Ashraya, the shelter, is the Supreme Lord. So there is no other shelter except from Supreme Lord. And all his emanations that fall in the category of Ashritya Tattva. That means which is emanating from the Lord, but cannot give shelter independently without the Supreme Lord. So, so where is my focus? Is my focus on the Lord's creation, this material objects or something else? Or is my focus and consciousness is fixed upon the Supreme Lord, who is the shelter of everything? So usually our thoughts and our consciousness is submerged in the creation of the Lord rather than the creator. So by chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one of the things that we see is that our consciousness shifts from the material creation to see everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, and more specifically focusing on His name, glories, pastimes, which cleanses one's heart from all dirt and makes one ecstatic. And Prabhupada tells that. What happens when one develops this Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada says, just yesterday, we saw how they were chanting Hare Krishna and dancing in ecstasy throughout the whole Ratha Yatra procession. Do you think that was artificial? No. Artificially, nobody can chant and dance for hours together. They have actually awakened the Krishna consciousness by following a bona fide process. So this is very important. By following a bona fide process, again, religion means it has to be having a bona fide principles, because only the bona fide principles will bring a transformation of the consciousness, and consciousness in such a way that it makes one God conscious or Krishna conscious. Now, these are the tests. For example, someone may say, oh, I'm practicing this yoga, I'm practicing that type of meditation. The question is, are you able to change your consciousness to God consciousness? Are you able to feel ecstasy by your practice? So, and Prabhupada is saying that these things are only possible when one takes to this bona fide process. And the bona fide process that is recommended for this age is chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So this process of hearing and chanting and Vishnu Smaranam, remembering the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, not demigods, not some other human beings, no. By doing this, one's heart, Shrunvatam Swadakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana, Hridyantasto hi abhadrani vidunoti shruhut satam. Because the Lord who is present within everyone's heart, when he sees that a devotee is making an endeavor to understand about him, Janma Karma Chame Divyam. So when one is trying, so Lord who is present within one's heart, he gives further directions. He cleanses the abhadra. Abhadra is what? The desire to enjoy material world, material life, the material desires within one's heart. So Lord who is present, when we hear the glories of the Lord who is present within the heart, he mercifully cleanses the heart of the living entity from inauspicious material desires. And as his material desires vanishes, Shuddha Chitte Kare Udaya. So as and more we hear the glories of the Supreme Lord, the glories of the holy name, the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, what is happening is that our chitta is becoming Shuddha. What does that mean? Our consciousness, which is filled with so many things, past impressions, past experiences, fears, anxieties, which are all so much deeply ingrained in our subconsciousness, they are difficult to take out without a bona fide process. So one other transformation that we can see is that all our anarthas, our unwanted things and experiences start to vanish by engaging in devotional service. The influence of those unwanted things. So people in this material world, one of the biggest cause of suffering is not the suffering which is gross. Gross suffering one can handle. But even more bigger than that is a subtle suffering that people undergo. Oh, he said something 4 years ago. Oh, my husband is not looking at me properly. My brother is not talking to me. My parents are unhappy with me. So then those subtle things which are troubling the mind and heart is much more problem. And people do not know how to address them. At least there is some understanding of how to handle the gross sufferings, but the subtle suffering is so much. But here at once, by taking to this devotional process, those unwanted elements which are present in the subconsciousness will vanish, and then the pure consciousness will emerge. The true Krishna conscious, which is every living entity is, when that emerges, then one sees, as we see that in Bhagavad Gita it is said, Susukam Kartuam Avyayam. Devotional service is full of bliss, full of joy. And we are not able to experience because we are still caught up in impure consciousness. Purifying our existence, purifying our consciousness is the goal of life. And that is done by this Shravanadi. Again here, Adaya, just like Dharmadayascha Artha. So Adaya, Adi, refers from beginning from Shravanam. So this process of hearing is so important because it is by this process that we can awaken our pure consciousness. And it is important to recognize that the transcendental words, which are glorifying the Supreme Lord, as present in Srimad Bhagavatam, as present in Bhagavad Gita, the holy name of the Lord, these are filled with potency to cleanse our heart, to cleanse our impure consciousness. And therefore, it is being repeatedly emphasized in this verse. Prabhupada is saying that one should not lose one's time in less inferior engagement, rather one should take to the devotional service of the Lord. Because without taking to devotional service of the Lord, one cannot find complete satisfaction. And even more so interestingly, Prabhupada mentioned some very important points towards the end, where Prabhupada says that even by coming to Brahmabhuta stage, for example, people, even in the platform of Jnana Yoga, may recognize that, oh, I'm not this body, I'm spirit, soul, but I'm going to merge into the Brahman. So even they may feel certain amount of satisfaction, a certain amount of tranquility. As we see in Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kankshati. So a person may reach to a state of recognizing that I am not this body, but I am spirit, soul. But Prabhupada is making a distinction here very clearly with satisfaction as not being the ultimate goal or the perfection of spiritual life. In the sense, it's just some sort of neutral stage. It's not the positive stage. It's like the negative stage is the material life. Satisfaction is like neutrality. So one should progress by attaining neutrality and equality in the relative world. And passing the stage of equanimity, one is fixed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So if one considers an axis, the point of satisfaction, neutrality, and equanimity, as many religions talk about, is considered just like a halfway. And the positive side of that is the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Now, Prabhupada also gives this example that we are Satchit Ananda, we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and we are qualitatively one with the Supreme Lord in that sense that we have this Sat, eternity, Chit, component of knowledge, and the component of Ananda. But one who takes to this path of impersonal voidism or impersonal Brahman or Advaita philosophy, so they can only reach to this point of Sat and Chit, but they cannot experience this aspect of Ananda or transcendental bliss, which is found in the reciprocation from the Lord. Because that is missing, even if they reach to the stage of Brahmabhuta, they come back, and until they get the association with pure devotees of the Lord, they get stuck in that status quo. But here, Prabhupada says that by practicing devotional service, one will not only be able to maintain that platform of realizing that I'm not this body, but I'm the spirit soul, but also one can increase further transcendental realization by practicing devotional service. What is that? One can experience the loving reciprocation of the Supreme Lord, and which is full of transcendental bliss. And when one is situated in that transcendental reciprocation of the Supreme Lord, all dissatisfaction, all despondency which is present in one's heart will vanquish. Suprasidati, yayatma suprasidati. So this is a very clear instruction that the goal of religion is not just to limit to the highest aspect of dharma, artha, kama, moksha, which people think is usually liberation, merging into the impersonal Brahman. That is also not considered significant to any extent by the devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because there is the happiness that is derived from loving transcendental loving service of the Lord is considered like an ocean of happiness. And while even the happiness that is derived from the Brahmananda, or the happiness from the merging in the Brahman, is considered like a drop in an ocean. And it is said, if you consider that drop as an ocean, a drop of that would be a happiness that is derived from the material enjoyment. So, and therefore it is clearly mentioned here that if one wants to experience the Satchitananda, even the blissful experience, the blissful part of one's spiritual nature, one must engage in devotional service. Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karayodaya. So, and one should also recognize that there are lower or inferior engagements or inferior. So again, in religion, it is very important to recognize not all religions talk about the pure essence of the subject of who is God, what is spiritual world, what is spirit soul, what are the activities of the spirit soul. Um, uh, so these aspects are called transcendental knowledge or pure transcendental subjects. And Srimad Bhagavatam deals with only transcendental subject, not with anything mundane material subject. And the distinction between different religions is the degree to which this transcendental subject matters are infused into them. So this Paravidya is not covered exclusively in many religions. But in case of the Bhagavata Dharma, the only description is about the Paravidya. And according to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, he says, even this, the Chatur Varga or the four religious principles, they also fall under the category of Aparavidya or material engagement or material knowledge. Because in comparison to the transcendental bliss and the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord, all of them fall similar to the engagement of material kind. So therefore, in summary, one requires the help of a pure devotee, spiritual master to resolve one's life crisis. One must approach a pure devotee, surrender to him, and seek instructions from a pure devotee. In our lives also, we undergo various crises, and they should be taken as an opportunity to advance in our dependency and surrenderance to the pure devotee and the Supreme Lord, as in the case of Arjuna, Parishit Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj. And they all overcame and became victorious. And so is the case of Srila Vyasadeva in this case. And the quality and the nature of a pure devotee of the Lord is that they can immediately identify the problem, the prompt diagnosis at once. And they also give the solution, the root problem, the root cause of the problem, and the solution. So this is a very important principle. If one wants to overcome, surrenderance to pure devotees, following their instructions is key. And then there are different kinds of religion. Pure religion means to develop understanding of who God is and how to love him. And even in the religion, there are different aspects that are covered to different degrees. But according to Srimad Bhagavatam, it is called Kaitava Dharma if it is not talking about pure subject of love of God, and if it is not invoking pure love of God, then that subject matter is not considered to be pure religion. So even within religion, there are aspects like dharma, artha, kama, moksha, but they are said to be inferior engagement. And Srila Vyasadeva's despondency is considered because of describing these four things in more detail than the glories of the Supreme Lord. Whereas it is said that even by attaining to the process of moksha or Brahmabhuta stage, that is not sufficient, it's not complete. There is even much more satisfaction is just the beginning of transcendental bliss. But actual experience of transcendental bliss is found by rendering devotional service. And therefore, in conclusion, Naradji is recommending Vyasadeva that now you should eagerly and repeatedly describe the path of devotional service. And this would cure him from gross despondency. Similarly, in our life, the dissatisfaction and the trouble that we are all encountering can at once be thrown out if we engage repeatedly in glorifying the Supreme Lord, his holy name, his pastimes, his pure devotees, and repeatedly engage in the path of devotional service. Just one last point. The devotees of the Lord are very, very eager in glorifying the Supreme Lord. So just because, as we see in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, when his heart, when he saw the Supreme Lord face to face, his heart was cleansed of all impurities, his anger towards his stepmother, his desires to grab more kingdom, and all those things got purified. And so this impurities within our heart which are present, they immediately vanquish if we take to devotional service. And not only that, the devotees, when they see this transformation within them, that all these unwanted things vanish and the positive aspect of glorifying the Lord begins in them. And Prabhupada mentions there are two kinds of devotees, Ghostanandis and Bhajananandis. So devotees, when they experience this bliss that they're obtaining from the devotional service of the Lord, they want to go out and help others. Oh, why are you struggling? This is so simple. Shramanadi Shuddha Chitte. Simply hear the glories of the Lord, simply chant the glories of the Lord, and your life will be all good. Why not take to this? So this is another important aspect, that devotees should experience this, what is this, by direct perception. What is that word? This. Pratyaksha avagamam dharmayam. So when one directly experiences this ecstatic feelings that one obtains, the bliss that obtains from the transcendental loving service to the Lord, the devotees want to go out and talk about this. And Srila Prabhupada is a wonderful example of this. In spite of having the comforts of living in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada was so compassionate and he was filled with this desire to help the other conditioned souls. So following the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada, we should all imbibe to practice this devotional service and directly experience Susukham Kartu Avyam, the aspect of transcendental bliss from devotional service, and go out and help others take to this process of devotional service, by which not only the devotee who's preaching, but also the one who's receiving, everyone gets freed from this gross despondency and become transcendently joyful. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
You were mentioning about Ashraya Tattva and Ashriya Tattva, Prabhu. Can you expand a little bit on that, please?
So basically, if you look at our consciousness, so are we focusing on the Supreme Lord or on his creation? So, for example, his creation means things in the material world. For example, we focus on, let's say I'm chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So when I'm paying attention to the sound vibration, my consciousness is focused upon the Supreme Lord, who is the shelter of everything. And let me just dig up the right verse and I'll just show you that. So this is mentioned in a purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So basically, the point that I was trying to bring in, I'll share the purport. It's very nice purport. So basically, the idea is how much am my consciousness is absorbed in the creation of the Lord, and how much am I absorbed in the creator of all these things. So basically, the point here is we see creation independent of the creator, and we are submerged in that consciousness. But the process of religion is to turn our consciousness towards the Supreme. And even when we look at this creation, we have to see in relation to the creator. So when that is missing, there is an independent perception of the world outside, and then these tendencies of lording over comes in. But when we see who is the creator, who is the proprietor, who is the enjoyer, even when we look at the creation, when that consciousness is developed, one is free from this material tendencies of sense gratification. One sees, oh, I'm not the proprietor of this. The Supreme Lord is the proprietor. He is the enjoyer. And therefore, he should receive this. And only the remnants I can take. So then this competition for this material lording over, the controlling nature, they all vanish. So the point is, where is my consciousness? Is it seeing things in relation to the Supreme Lord? Is it focused on the Supreme Lord? Or is it just seeing independently things outside the Supreme Lord? Does that help, Prabhu?
Yeah, it does help, Prabhu.
I'll share the purport, which will perhaps give you more insights into that description. So the idea is that we need to shift our consciousness towards the Supreme Lord. Until unless that does not happen, we are stuck in the laws of material nature. But when we transform our consciousness towards the spiritual subject, towards the Supreme Lord, then our consciousness is purified and we are freed from the laws of material nature, the effect and the influence of the laws of material nature. Otherwise, we are dragged by the laws of material nature. And that transformation takes place through the bona fide process of religion.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Okay, if there are no questions or comments, we'll stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining. Today evening we'll have a continuation of Bhagavad Gita discussion. So please join us in the evening. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.